the standard art screen back. It'll be 28A2. The bottom of the page is where the Mishnah is. So again, 28A2 if you're using the back, Chav Ches Amud Beis in the front, at the bottom, the Mishnah. So we're starting the next Mishnah tonight. So the Mishnah begins, Natal es hamafteach. So we said that the Kohen who is in charge of getting the day started, again, we said, remember the Kohanim were sleeping in the Beis Hamikdash. If you were looking at the map, everyone should have in their Gemara a folded up map that's included. The Beis Hamikdash was number 20. That room that was on the northern wall, that was a great chamber where there was a fire going, and that's where the Kohanim were going to be on duty the next day. That's where they would sleep. So one of the Kohanim who was in there was Natal es hamafteach. He would take the key. He had the key in there, in that room. That's where it was kept. So he would take that key. Upasach es hapishpash. He would open up the small gate. So again, if you look at that map where 20, the Beis Hamikdash is, if you look at the inner gate that takes you into the Azara, into the Beis Hamikdash, there was a major gate there, but there was a smaller door that went in as well. So the Pishpash was the smaller door. So this Kohen who had the key would unlock that smaller door, go through that smaller door into the Azara. Some of the Mefarshim explained they wouldn't open the major gates until it was daybreak. So this is before sunrise. So the Pishpash, that was the small door. You can imagine like the small little slender, almost like closet-like door. That's what that Kohen would use his key to unlock and go out into the Azara. What would he do once he was in the Azara? So the Mishnah says as follows. He would exit the Beis Hamikdash, going out into the courtyard. And all the Kohanim were in the Beis Hamikdash, they would follow him into the Azara. And they carried 2 torches of fire in their hands. Now there's some discussion. Did that mean every Kohen carried 2 torches, or each group? Before each group of Kohanim, there was 2 torches. That's what you'll see discussed there. All the Kohanim who came out of the Beis Hamikdash and they're now in the Azara, they broke up into 2 groups. One group went along the Achsadra. If you look again at this map, so along the perimeter on the inside of the Azara, there was an Achsadra. Achsadra was a colonnade. Imagine you have marble columns and there's some type of roofing, almost like a portico. So that was the one sheltered area within the Beis Hamikdash because it was all open to the sky. But it seems like along the wall of the Azara, around that perimeter, there were columns and then some type of roof. It'll be discussed a little in the Gemara what it was made of. So they would break up into 2 groups. One of them would go along the wall on the eastern wall, and then one would go to the western wall. Meaning, so one group would go leaving the Beis Hamikdash on that northern wall, going to the west. They'll go walk along the whole western wall, then walk along the whole southern wall. The other group would leave the Beis Hamikdash, go north for a little bit until the eastern wall, and then walk south on the eastern wall. And where would they meet up? They would, while they were walking, they would check and inspect that everything was where they needed it to be. It seems like there were compartments where all the klisharis, the service utensils that would be needed for the day, where they were kept underneath that achsadra, underneath that colonnade. So they would walk along, make sure that all the kalim were there. By the way, one of the kinos you're going to see, one of the kinos is going to be discussed on Tisha B'Av, is going to talk about how shocked they were when they got to the Beis Hamikdash in the morning and they saw that the klisharis were missing, meaning when they did their inspection that there wasn't the right number, there was something missing there. So it says there they walked and did their inspection until they got to the place where chavitim were made. So again, if you're using the map, so that'll be on the eastern wall near the Shar Nikner. Will be room number 10. Room number 10 was called Lishkas Chavitin. That was the room of the Chavitin. What were Chavitin? Chavitin were loaves. Every day, the Kohen Gadol brought 12 loaves that were called Chavitin. They were mixed. They were kneaded with warm water and oil. So he would bring 12 loaves just for the Kohen Gadol as a korban mincha on the Mizbeach, 6 in the morning and then 6 in the afternoon. So the Kohanim would meet up at that Beis HaChavitin, and that's what it says. Egiu elu ve'elu, when the 2 groups met up that had walked the whole circumference. So Amru, they would say to each other, Shalom, Akol Shalom. It's well, everything is well, everything's where it needed to be. Meaning all the klei sharis, everything's accounted for, all the utensils are accounted for what we need for a day of avodah. Hemidu osei chavitin, lasos chavitin. And then the Kohanim who were in charge, even though it was the Kohen Gadol's had paid for the chavitin out of his pocket. He didn't actually make the loaves of bread. The Kohanim would do that. So there was specialized tasks. So the Kohanim, whose job it was to make the chavitin, they'd get started in that room number 10 at making the chavitin. Mishnah continues. So we said that the first avodah of the day was Trumas Hadeshen, a special task of taking some of the ashes off the Mizbeach from yesterday, depositing them on the floor in the Beis Hamikdash, and miraculously the floor would absorb those ashes. So the Kohen who won that lottery, that was spoke about at the end of last Mishnah, the Kohen who won that lottery would have that task of doing Trumas Hadeshen. All the other Kohanim would say to him, be careful not to touch the utensil. There was a special silver shovel that the Kohen who did Trumas Hadeshen used, and they would tell him, don't touch the shovel until you sanctified your hands and feet from the water of the kiyar. The kiyar, it's spelled L-A-V-E-R, the translation. And I always forget if it's pronounced laver or laver. Anyone remember how it's pronounced? Is that laver? Laver. Okay. Laver. The kiyar was laver. That was the special utensil that was used to sanctify the Kohanim's hands and feet. So they would tell him, listen, out of respect, this wasn't like it wasn't tamei, but they would still, out of respect for the shovel, it's one of the klishares, don't handle it until you've washed your hands and feet. And where was this shovel kept during the night? It was kept between the ramp and the it was at the corner of the ramp and the Mizbeach, west of the ramp. So if you look at the map, again, 27 is the ramp of the Mizbeach. So on the west side of that ramp, that's where the shovel was kept, and that's where the guy who won, the Kohen who won the right to do Trumas Hadeshen, that's where he would find the shovel. Nobody would walk with him. Again, remember, they were all at the room of the Chavitin, or according to some, they went back to the Beis Hamokad room, but nobody would walk with that Kohen when he went to do Trumas Hadeshen. So when he went to, you see number 28, that circle, that's where the kiyar was. So nobody was actually able to see him when he sanctified his hands and feet at the kiyar, took the shovel, and then went up on that ramp. So he'd be out of sight for a while. So the Mishnah says, nobody went with him. He won that right. He went on his own. He didn't have a lamp or a lantern in his hand. He had to have his hands free for the shovel. So what illuminated this before sunrise? So how did he see where he was going? Well, the pyre on the Mizbeach was still burning from the previous night. So again, it wasn't in its full, blown, inferno, but there still was some flame going. So there still was some light. He didn't have to struggle. He wasn't going to trip on anything. If you're using the back, we just turned the page to 28b1. And again, if you're using the front, we've also turned the page to Chavches Amud Beis. Mishnah continues, Lo Yishom Es Kolo. Nobody could hear his footsteps. Remember, he's barefoot, walking on the stone floor, so they couldn't hear his footsteps. Ad Shishom En Kol Ha'et She'asa Ben Katan Muchani Lakir. The only way that they could tell that he got to his destination was they heard the cranking of the wheels of a special device that was crafted by a Kohen by the name of Ben Katan for the kiyar. What's that talking about? So again, if you look at that map, that circle is 28, that's where the kiyar was. There was a challenge with the kiyar, that laver that had the water. There's a prohibition that anything that was kept in a container in the Beis Hamikdash overnight becomes puzzle because of lina. It spent the night in a utensil, so it would have to be spilled out, would not be able to be used the next day. The kiyar held an incredible amount of water. So if every morning they had to spill out the water of the kiyar because it was in it overnight, it was a big, first of all, it was a big waste of water. But second, it looks bad. It looks like we're taking something that was used in the Beis Hamikdash, now we're just spilling it out. We want to prevent that if possible. So there was a Kohen who was a very crafty fellow by the name of Ben Katan. He came up with the idea. He came up with a great pulley system. I haven't seen any definitive drawing of what it looked like. It seems in my speculations. He came up with a great pulley system that he dug a hole in the floor of the Beis Hamikdash that the whole kiyar, the entire laver, could be lowered by this pulley system during the night into the subterranean spring. So it was in water. If the kiyar, which was containing water, was underground in the well with the water, that made it that the water in the kiyar, so to say, is attached to that underground source. It does not become puzzle during the night because of lina. So what they would do is every night at the end of the avoda, they would lower the kiyar into the ground so it would be submerged in the well. And every morning, this Kohen who won the right to do Trumas Hadeshin, his task, he would pull the hoist system to raise it up. So when they started to hear that pulling system and they heard the noise, the cranking of the wheels, whatever, that's when they realized, the Kohen's okay, he made it to his destination. Mishnah continues. He took the silver shovel and he went up to the mizbeach. Why the silver shovel, not the gold? So all the commentators explain gold, and we all know this gold is much more delicate than silver. So if he was going to use, he's got to stick the shovel into the heap of the coals that burnt through the night. It was pretty hot in there. It would ruin the gold, but the silver was tough enough to handle it. So he took a silver shovel, and he went up the ramp to the top of the mizbeach. And he wants to get from the most burnt part of not just the coals, but the burnt up limbs from carbonos from yesterday. So he wants to get the ones that are really, really finished. So he wants to get to the middle of the pile. So he uses the shovel to flick away some of the coals on the external part, that to the right, to the left, and on top, so he could get at the middle, and he scoops up some of that. And he scoops up the most consumed, innermost, burnt, charred parts there that were really at the point of just falling apart. And he takes it down the ramp and he comes to the floor. He faces north when he gets off the ramp. So again, if you look at the picture, if you walk down the ramp, you're now facing south. So he would make a left. So he's now facing east, and then he would face north. So that's what he's saying. He's now going to face north. And it says, what did he do? He would go 10 amos, 10 cubits along the eastern side of the ramp. And then what did he do? And he would deposit the ashes that he took, those burnt up coals that he took from the top, the Trumas Hadeshin, from the pile from yesterday's karbanos. He would take that and he would deposit that on the floor 3 tfachim away from the ramp. Malkum shenos muras ha'of, and that's the same spot when there would be an ola that was brought from a bird. So the Kohen, they would have to take the head and the innards, and that was not burnt on the mizbeach. That would be deposited in the same spot. And also dishon mizbeach apnimi, the ashes from yesterday's burning on the golden mizbeach where they burnt the ketoras, along with dishon menorah, the ashes that they scooped out of the the candelabra, and all of those, the Gemara tells us, miraculous, would be absorbed into gesundheit, into the floor of the Beis Hamikdash. That is what the Mishnah concludes over there. That is that. Okay. Now let's just see. We have 2 minutes. Let's see a little bit of the Gemara. So the Gemara says, we had just said about achsadros. Your standard colonnade gesundheit was made out of wood. So the Mishnah now questions, what do you mean? How did they have wood structures in the Beis Hamikdash? How did you have this colonnade? How did you have this structure made of wood in the courtyard? Hatanya, we learned in a brayso. Rabbi Lozer ben Yaakov Omer, minayin she'enos in achsadros bazara. How do I know you're not allowed to make wooden achsadros in the courtyard, and colonnades in the courtyard? Talmud Lomar, the Torah says, Lo sita lecha asherah. You're not allowed to plant an asherah tree on Har Habayis. Kol eitz al mizbach Hashem lokecha. Or any wood, any tree near the mizbeach. Hachi kalmar, and this is how we darshan that. Lo sita lecha asherah. First of all, we're not allowed to plant an asherah tree on Har Habayis. And second of all, no wooden structure, not just wood, but no wooden structure is allowed to be on Har Habayis. If that's the case, how did you have a colonnade going around the whole perimeter of the Azara? Gemara answers, we're not talking about a wooden colonnade. This was made of stone. It was made of stone. So it had stone pillars and there was stone tiled roof on top of it. There was no wood whatsoever. Mishnah, well, let's just finish this little bit of Gemara. The next part of Mishnah says that they examined everything until they got to the Chavitin chamber. So the Gemara says, do you mean to tell me that Chavitin was the first part of the morning's avoda? That's not true. The Mishnah Hatanya, we learned in a brayso, how do I know that nothing preceded the Tamid, the daily Tamid offering of lambs? So where does this coming from that Chavitim come first? So Talmud Lomar, the Torah told us that the Ola is the first thing to happen in the Mizbeach. So Amar Rabba Ola Rishona, the Ola goes first. So what's this with the chavitin? So Rabbi Yehuda, lahachem chamin lerevicha. It didn't. Yeah, they started working on the chavitin. They started to boil up the water that would be needed to knead the chavitin. That doesn't mean that they brought the chavitin. You're right. The tamid was the first thing that was brought in the Beis Hamikdash, but that doesn't mean that they weren't allowed to start preparing the chavitin, and that's what we're getting at. Okay, we're going to hold it here, and God willing, we'll continue next week, Sunday night. Sunday night's going to be Tisha B'Av. We'll continue God willing, Monday night with the next Mishnah. It begins the next chapter. All right, Rav Chanani ben Akash Amar Ratzah Kodesh Baruch Hu Zakas Yisrael Levika Achir Balam Torah Mitzvah Shenemar Adonai Chav Ko Yagdil Torah V'Yadir. Amen.